We have two lateral ventricles. We have two lateral ventricles. And lateral ventricles have three horns. This is the anterior horn or the frontal horn. This is the occipital or posterior horn. This is the inferior or the temporal horn. And here you have the third ventricle. And this area is the adhesio-interthalamica. Lateral walls of the third ventricle are formed by the diencephalon, superiorly by the thalamus, inferiorly by the hypothalamus. And what you see here, this is, look at it, this one here are the interventricular foramen. Interventricular foramen. You have two lateral horns, so you have two intervertebral foraminae, which connect lateral ventricle to the third ventricle. This is the third ventricle. Then this one here is the aqueduct cerebri, or the cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, which connects third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. Here is the fourth ventricle. The floor of the fourth ventricle is called the fossa, rhomboid fossa. And here you have the lateral recess of the rhomboid fossa. Tip of the lateral recesses are open, which are called foramen luschka, or the lateral apertures. On the roof of the rhomboid fossa, within the lower half of the roof of the rhomboid fossa, you have a defect which is called foramen magendi, or the median aperture. Through these apertures, cerebrospinal fluid drain into the subarachnoid space. We have questions about these ventricles and their connections. Okay, now here you have again the lateral ventricle. Two lateral ventricles are separated by a thin membrane-like structure called septum pellucidum. Septum pellucidum, this is. Right here you have the foramen of Monro, or the interventricular foramen, which connects lateral ventricle to the third ventricle. This is the third ventricle. Lateral walls of the third ventricle are formed by the diencephalon. Particularly, upper half of the lateral wall of the third ventricle is formed by the thalamus, and the lower half of the lateral wall of the third ventricle is formed by the hypothalamus. This is the hypothalamus. Here is the fourth ventricle. Third ventricle is connected to the fourth ventricle to the aqueduct of mesencephaly, or the aqueduct of Sylvius, this one here. Okay, now let's put it here.